In the next 10 years, there's going to be many folds increase in the fraud in cards and payments in industry. We're looking at a total revenue loss of about $400 billion, as in how data analytics is increasing and trying to prevent the frauds by detecting them early. The fraud mechanisms are also catching up, and therefore it's very important that we have a little bit of discussion about the security aspects in the payments and card industry. Hello friends, this is Saurabh and welcome back to my YouTube channel. If you're new to the channel, please do consider subscribing, because on this channel I bring up latest insights in the field of payments and cards, domain, data, and product management. The one major body that governs the payments and card industry is PCI, which is Payments and Card Industry. And it's actually created by a collaboration between 5 of the major brands that you can see in the slide here. And on top of it, we also have GDPR laws and maybe some other local laws in the geography that we're talking about that help to prevent fraud and also ensure that the customer data is held safe. So what kind of data is at risk? As you can see on the screen, this is a picture of a credit card. So rest assured, we are not putting in a real credit card here, but you can see the different data entities that are being reflected here. So there's a cardholder name, there's a PAN, there's an expiration date. There is also some other information at the back of the card. For example, you can see the CVV2 information and also something called as magnetic stripe. Now, if you have a swipe card or a chip card, it depends whether you use a magnetic stripe or you use a chip. But this is the kind of information that we're talking about that we want to prevent from going into the wrong hands and then circulating in the dark web where it will be misused. So what is PCI Security and Compliance? Well, PCI says that in order for a customer to be protected from any fraudulent activity or any compromise with his data, there are different aspects that need to be taken care of. So it starts all the way right from using the POS machine, where the PIN entry mechanism has to be safeguarded. And it not just ends there. You're also looking at securing these applications when the transaction moves, flows from the merchant to the acquirer, then to the network, and then to the issuer. There are multiple applications that are doing the payment processing 24/7. And therefore, it's very important that all of these applications are secured and compliant to the PCI standards. And also, PCI specifically has very, very good rules around governing the data aspects. When I say good, what I mean is that PCI has given a clear guidance of what kind of information can be stored, what kind of information cannot be stored, what kind of information, when flowed from one channel to the other, has to be masked or tokenized. What is masking? What is tokenized? We'll look into this in the video. Okay, so in this slide, you can see the various data entities that are being reflected, which actually are supposed to be handled sensitively. Okay, because this is the information that can be used to determine who owns the card, and the card can also be misused. Okay, so the cardholder data is entities like PAN, cardholder name, expiration date, and service code. Now, service code is something that you actually use to determine the kind of card that is being used. Okay, so are there any limitations on this card? In what circumstances can this card be not used nationally, internationally, etc., so on and so forth? Service code is something that revolves around those aspects. On the right hand side, you can see things like magnetic stripe or chip information, CVV2 information, you know, the 3 digits that are there at the back of your card, which you use when you complete a transaction, or the PIN when you use a POS machine and you have to enter your 4-digit PIN. So all of this information is actually sensitive in nature that has to be governed well. Now in this slide, you can see some data elements, actually the same data elements that we had in the previous slide, but it tells you what and how the storage has to be handled. Okay, so the first 4 entities there can be stored, the next 3 cannot be stored. There is also some governance around what information can be stored but cannot be read. Okay, what I mean is, if there is a card number, for any reason of your day-to-day operations, you may be needing to store that information on your payment application or your database. But when you do that, you have to make sure that you don't store it in the clear, meaning you don't expose the correct card number or the actual card number. What you do is you actually change that card number and disguise it into some form and shape which is not sensitive at all then. And therefore, the risk of that being misused gets reduced. Okay, so now let's take a look at this through an example. Okay, I'm going to go to this website, which is actually a link that has been given on the PCI portal. And from there, we are going to navigate to the American Express website. Okay, and we're going to check certain aspects of what American Express says about handling the PCI sensitive information. So let's do this. So I'm going to click on this link here. It takes me to this document on the PCI portal, and in this PCI portal, it talks about various different aspects. You know, how do you maintain the pin transaction security? What is it that you need to take care of about the data security standard, applications, and the point-to-point encryption. Now we are basically more interested in how do we actually use the information that's given on the American Express website. Okay, so we are going to go there and read that. If you actually browse through this document, it also gives you all of those requirements that PCI says you must be adhering to. Okay, so there are about 12 requirements, which have also then further been broken down into some subsections. And so you need to take care of each of these requirements. All right, so this is something that you can probably go into detail at your end. I'll share the link in the description so you can go through that and read it. Now, how do you become PCI DSS compliant? There are certain steps that you can see over here. So you have to scope out your application. What is it that you want to assess? And then you have to assess it. There are some documents that you need to fill, send it to the PCI personnel, and they will do the validation. If there is any discrepancy found, or if there is any sort of lack in the governance is found, then they are going to inform you. You have got to take the remedial action and then make sure that the application is compliant. So you choosing a quality certified quality security assessor. How do you do that? All of that information is given over here. And once you pass all of these sections, it then brings you to this particular page where you have some links. So there are some links about training to create more awareness about PCI. Then there are some links about DSS standards. So what are the standards? If you want to delve into deeper aspects of the DSS, then you can read through this. Whether you and your application are ready and compliant or not compliant, you can actually take a self-assessment questionnaire, and you can find it out. Let me do a find here, and we will go to the American Express section directly. So we say American Express. All right, so you can see here there is a link. There are some links for each of the payment brands. And as an example, we are going to use the first one, which is American Express Data Security. And this link will take me to the American Express portal. And the American Express portal is now explaining all of the different aspects about the security standards. There is an operating policy that you can go through and understand in a little bit more detail. This particular part is specifically more relevant for people with the business analysis background in payments. Maybe not that relevant for developers and other skill sets. But then, yes, if you are a business analyst and you are looking to understand this more in a little bit more detail, then you can go through this. Now, this will give you a very good idea of what actually in reality has been told by these card schemes and brands on their websites about PCI DSS compliance. All right, so you can go through that. There's quite a bit of information available. What happens if there is a security incident that happens in your organization? Okay, if you are a merchant and if there is some compromise that happens with the card holder information, if you feel that the cardholder information has been misused, you have to raise an incident. So there is a process that you can see here: step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. You have to raise this with MX, and then American Express is going to help you to resolve this. And similarly, there is a mechanism set up by the other brands as well. Okay, so that's about an example of how you will go about implementing DSS security for your particular card brand. Okay, now comes a very important segment of this video, where we talk about various different tools and techniques with which we try to ensure that the data becomes safe. We try to avoid the misuse of this data. Okay, so this is specifically now about a little bit more into the data aspects. So what is data tokenization? So data tokenization is basically a technique that's being used recently. I mean, when I say recent, I mean for the last few years. This is what PCI has been prescribing to various entities, merchants, acquirers, that this is what you should be looking at to make your systems compliant. This also helps merchants to get more business, because one of the things that merchants want to do is they don't want to make the cardholder enter the card information again and again. That's going to be a hassle. And so as a part of improving the user experience, what we want is that we give an option to the cardholder that if you're okay, then, and if you trust us, then you please submit your card information to us. We will make sure that your card information is not compromised. And next time when you log into our website or you log into our app, then you would not need to punch in this information again. You can see this example on something like an Amazon website, right? So when you actually register on the Amazon website, you have to register your card details as well, even though you may not buy the product if every time you're browsing the website. But the point here is that Amazon wants to make sure that it has all legitimate customers, their information has been validated, and they want to give you that seamless experience whenever you want to place an order. So that's about tokenization. And now we will look at sort of a general flow of how tokenization works. Now this could vary. Okay, what I have done here is I have taken this as a reference of a generic flow of how the tokenization works in a typical transaction. And many a times these days what happens is that brands like Visa will give you an option wherein they would handle some of these tokenization aspects for you throughout the life cycle, and which will make things seamless again. All right, so let's look at that. And if you have ever noticed, when you're trying to place an order on a website or through an app, these days there is an option, pay through Visa, pay by Visa, and things like that. So basically there are some internal mechanisms, infrastructure, APIs that Visa is putting in place to make sure that you don't need to struggle for doing all of that, and Visa will do it on your behalf. So what really happens here is these series of steps that you can see. The payment gets initiated and it gets routed through the acquiring bank to the network and the issuing bank. And all throughout this process, what we are really trying to do is we are trying to mask or tokenize that information. I shouldn't be using the term mask, because mask is actually something different technically. But we are trying to tokenize the information, the sensitive information that is generated when you actually generate a real-time event when swiping the card. And then once it actually flows from one entity to the other, we are trying to make sure that the tokenization is actually maintained. And then once you get it back as a confirmation, then the merchant will get the tokenized details back along with the confirmation that the payment has been approved or declined. So that is what we are trying to display here. Now, there are a lot of other terms that you may have come across when it comes to data tokenization. There is also a term called as encryption, which was very popular until recently. And then now tokenization is something that is catching up, right? And we see this everywhere. And then there is another term which has come in again recently, which is anonymization. Specifically, if you are based out of Europe, and you have actually been acquainted with something called as GDPR, which is to actually, the guidelines that to make sure that the cardholder information is not compromised, or any information that is relevant to the customer or to the cardholder or to anyone for that matter, which can be used or misused to identify him, is governed through GDPR principles now. And anonymization is something that came up after the GDPR principles were applied in the Europe. Okay, so all these three things were actually meant to create strength in the security mechanism in the payments world. What is the difference between these three then, if they all are actually being used to increase the security? So why is it that we need three different things? Well, actually it depends really on the use case. If your use case is something about securing your card number or maybe social security number or things like that, and that information is actually exposed in a message, and you want to cover that information or you want to disguise that information in such a way that the processing gets done, but the actual details do not get exposed to anyone. In that case, you go with something called as tokenization. Okay, so it works on the message level actually. But when it comes to, say, a requirement of just securing a complete file, for example, yeah, then in that case, you use something like an encryption. You can actually encrypt the whole file. Okay, it really depends. You can actually encrypt some entities or you can encrypt the whole file, and there are different mechanisms of how the encryption works. I'm not going to go into the detail of those things. I think otherwise the video is going to become too long. But then if you actually go to Google, you can read a little bit about encryption. All the major cloud providers, public cloud providers today, for example AWS, Google, they are all providing you some ways and mechanisms of encrypting your information. Right? Whether the data is at rest or whether the data is in transit, there are some ways and mechanisms, some encryption technologies that they are providing you. Either those technologies are their in-house produced technologies, or they are giving you some technologies which are existing in the market, but they have incorporated with the public cloud. For example, if you have your files or your payment related information or any other domain information for that matter, and you want to upload that information on the cloud, then you can use an encryption mechanism that is being offered by any of these clouds, and there would be an encryption key which can be used by the recipient. Right? It's like a lock and key mechanism. So you lock it everything from here and you send it, and the other person on the other side is having a key with him. He will unlock everything and he will use the information. That's the concept there. Okay. And then anonymization is more relevant in analytical use cases where you actually want to use this information not for operational purposes but for analytics, for driving business intelligence insights. So what does it actually mean? When you actually swipe a card and when you make a transaction, there are two things that are happening. One, there is a lot of data that gets generated. Second, the transaction itself is getting executed. The execution of transaction is something that's pretty normal and that has to happen. Obviously, you are making a purchase and you expect the purchase to go and get completed. And obviously, the debits and the credits will be adjusted. That's fine. But there is a lot of information, valuable information for the companies, whether it's the acquiring firm, whether it's the merchant, whether it's the issuing bank. There's a lot of information. If you are having a card that is being issued by a major bank, yeah, let's say Bank of America. Now, Bank of America would want to know, what kind of customers are using my card. What is the age profile? Are there particular cities where the card is being used more and there are some where the card is used less? Similarly, if there is a merchant, he would want to know what is my customer profile? Why is it that a particular segment of customers are buying these products but not buying these? What can we do to make sure that these customers are also interested to buy the other set of products which is being sold less? A lot of analytical information is required, and in order to drive these analytics, you need to run some algorithms, right? We are talking a little bit about things like data analysis and data science here. We'll not go into the details of those areas. Again, that's sort of irrelevant to the subject here. But what I'm trying to say is there's a lot of data that is being generated that we want to use. Now the caveat here is that you cannot use this data as is, because this data is actually related to someone who is existing in the real world. Now, it's not the correct thing to do ethically, that in order for a company to derive their analytical algorithms, they are using my data. They're using my name, my age, my address to do that. So what we do is we mask that information. Okay. And we try to make sure that anything that is there in the data that can be used to identify me is cut off. When I say cut off, I mean if my name is, say for example, Saurabh, I will try to mask it to something else, or maybe delete the name and call myself as customer 1 in the database. Yeah, and that's how we do this for all the different entities. If there is an age that can be used to identify me, then instead of providing the age, I will give an age range over there. Okay, we'll look into this in a little bit more detail. Okay, I have taken an example here. I was just trying to explain the point here. So in the first column, I have taken some information from a transaction. Okay, some of the information would be there in the transaction event, and some of the information I have tried to use some key from the transaction event, some particular ID, and I'm trying to get who's the customer, what's his address, etc., etc. And I have all of this information in the clear with me. Now, this information operationally cannot be used in processing the payment because PCI is going to raise a flag for you, and therefore, whether it's tokenization or encryption, you have to change that sensitive information. So things like card number, which is the third value over there, has been tokenized into a different value here. Okay, all this happens through a server and a vault mechanism, which we call as the token vault. Okay, and encryption actually happens with the help of an encryption key, and there is an algorithm, as we have already discussed about this, right? So the next column, you can say the name of the customer has been encrypted into something else, which will have some characters. That information will not make sense to humanize at all. Okay, so that's what we do in encryption. And then in the last column here, you can see the information is something that humans can read easily and can make some sense out of it. So instead of the name David Frost, the name has now been changed to Harry Smith. Okay, which is an imaginary person. There is nobody like called as Harry Smith who stays in that particular address and with that particular age range. It's all just like a fictional sort of a character that has been created, and this is being done for millions of records because we need them for our analytical engine to be more precise. Okay, so for these algorithms to be precise, you have to feed them data, and the more data you give them, the more robust and the more precise the outcome of these analytical algorithms will be. Okay, so this is all what we do in tokenization, encryption, and anonymization. So this was more like a sort of a high level overview, and I'm sure there might be questions. Please try to leave them in the comments. I'll try to pick them up and I'll try to answer them. But the intent of putting the content to this extent was at least we talk about these things because, like I said, it doesn't really matter whether you are a business analyst, you are a production support guy, you are a developer, you are a platform lead, architect, whatever your role is. If you are working in cards and payments domain, you must pay attention to these kind of things because these are the minute details that are actually very important. And if you miss some of these details, the penalty is very, very high. So that's why they are very, very important. So there are some useful links over here. And I will put them all in the description. I'm just putting it out here just to call them out, but they would be there available in the description. In fact, I'll try to put more than these in the description. So with that, we come to an end to this video. And I hope you like this video. I hope you have got some more awareness about PCI DSS compliance. I hope you have got some more awareness about data tokenization, data anonymization, and data encryption. And if you found this information useful, then I would request you to please like the video and also subscribe to the video so that you get a notification anytime I post a new video. And that is also a sort of motivation for me to make more meaningful videos for you in the future. And also, last but not the least, if you found this video helpful, then please share it with your friends. My LinkedIn profile would be there in my description. If you want to connect with me on LinkedIn and if you want to share this video, please do that and I'll try to acknowledge that on the LinkedIn as well. And thank you over there. All right, so with that, we'll end the video here and I'll see you all next time. Until then, take care. Goodbye.